We got stressed because we're striving, surviving, keep on moving to a
Welcome everybody to Minding the Gap, a video and podcast series from Behavioral Sciences of Alabama. I am joined by, as usual, by Dr. David Barnhart and by Dave Barnhart, who are related. So welcome to both of you this morning. We're going to talk about religion and mental health. It's not controversial at all.
Nothing is controversial about the combination of religion and mental health. I've heard it said, Paul, by some clients that I've seen that the teaching of their particular church says that all you need is Jesus.
Just need God in your life.
Yeah. So you don't need medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And you certainly don't need therapy.
Yeah.
Well, I jumped right in that one, didn't I, Paul?
Yeah. Well, mental health started out as the idea of demons, and getting rid of the demons. The idea of, there was this mental health issues where, there was some kind of a spirit or demon inside a person, and the idea was to get that out. There was all kinds of rituals that they would do and these kinds of things, and eventually people figured out that getting in salt baths and doing all these things were really didn't make any difference at all. And science eventually took over, and because we've talked about this before, we don't have information, our minds make it up.
Yes.
And so the information was early, people are suffering from some mental problem, that they're just not, that something is not going like most people. And so there has to be some explanation for it. So a demon would be, without information, maybe that is true. And we've since learned that it's that people have different chemistry in their brains that creates these kinds of things, and we have a lot more knowledge now. But mental health and religion have always been connected, and still are
very, very connected in helpful ways. I should say that the other Dave Barnhart has he's actually Dr. Dave Barnhart. He's got a PhD from Vanderbilt in religion and ethics. Am I getting that right, Dave? So
yeah, that's correct.
Yes, and he has written on mental health and religion, or religion and mental health. I think maybe that was flip that around a little bit. I don't know, Dave. Do you have any?
Well, I think it's interesting when you kind of look at the history of how people have thought about mental disorders. Yeah, there was definitely, for a while people thought demonic possession, and then once people started looking more scientifically, they talked about the humors of the body, which is where we get adjectives like sanguine, which really just means blood, but sanguine means happy or cheerful, or choleric, because you're colicky, you're kind of grumpy. Or so people thought if your humors are out of balance, then your mental state might be out of balance, and they started looking that direction. And then, I guess probably the people point to Freud being the first real person who really looked at psychologists. But even as Paul was saying, he was, in a large extent, he was making up a story to fit the various pathologies he was seeing. It was a pretty good story because had a lot of staying power, and there's even some, now that we can look at the actual function of people's brains, we can say, oh yeah, there actually is quite a bit of unconscious processing that's happening in people's brains. And so I think part of what we're, these days we're in a really exciting place where we're, in a way sort of doing a philosophical, scientific, religious perspective on what does it mean to be a human person. And I think that's kind of where these things come together. Questions of meaning, and not just what makes people screwed up, whether it's demonic possession or trauma or chemical imbalances, but how do we thrive? What's the best way for people to be at their best? And I think all those are questions that you really, if you just look at it from a neurobiological perspective, you're going to miss something. If you just look at it from a spiritual, religious perspective, you're going to miss something. You really kind of need a holistic view of that kind of thing. That's where I think religion and mental health are most interesting, when they kind of bring us into those existential big questions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that we have been tuned into because of what we do, we have an intensive outpatient treatment program for obsessive compulsive disorder. And one of the ways that OCD manifests itself is in religious or moral scrupulosity, where people obsess about their faith or their moral position. Did I do the right thing? Am I a good enough person? Did I blaspheme God? Have I committed some kind of sin that's going to doom me? And a variety of other things.
Even
Yes.
the thoughts, having a thought
Mm-hmm.
of a sinful thought becomes bothersome and makes it necessary for the person to do something to alleviate that feeling of, oh my gosh, I've done something wrong. I've got to do something to correct this right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because I think, a lot of times, I think the words were meant helpfully when Jesus is preaching the Sermon on the Mount, and he says, he's talking to people, and he says to his male disciples, if you look at a woman with lust, you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. And so he's moving adultery from sort of the act into the thought of it. And that was intended to help kind of even the playing field, so that
Include
you're not,
everybody.
yeah, so you're not as judgmental of other people, right? But unfortunately, people hear that and they become more judgmental of themselves, because now they're policing their thoughts.
Oh my gosh,
all
I
the
can't
time.
have that thought. I'm a sinner. I've committed adultery, and it's the whole idea is that the thoughts, you can't help having those.
Yes, yeah, and we do know, like, you can train yourself to think certain ways, but if you're policing and you have anxiety about, oh my gosh, I've had a lustful thought, I need to go repent, then all you're doing is reinforcing those patterns. So, in other words, if you're angry with a brother or sister, you've committed murder, right? It's not meant to say, it's meant to help you kind of think about what leads to a more peaceful life with my neighbors. It's not meant for you to, like, people are gonna piss you off. It's you're a human being. You're gonna get angry. It's just so that you're less judgmental of murderers, and you're like, okay, well, I'm working on myself. I'm not worried about other people. And while I love the Sermon on the Mount, I think that those particular verses in the Bible cause people a lot of stress.
And it's interesting how that can go either way. It can create empathy, or it can
Yes.
create judgment.
Yes.
Based on your interpretation of it.
And I think so much of
people interpret it in so many different ways, and when it becomes legalistic, and that's when we have a problem. That's when people get stuck in a certain way of thinking that's just not helpful to our human connections with other people and ourselves.
And it's not just OCD where that might become an issue. So you could be judging yourself and not be obsessing or compulsing, but you could be depressing yourself or making yourself more anxious about your own thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I think is interesting, I think maybe you remember the author of the book, the one that talked about the doubting disease, that talked about.
Yes.
So do you remember the author's name? I can't remember.
I'll think about it.
Okay.
I'll come up with it.
So the funny thing is he looked at the letters of these people in monasteries in the Middle Ages, and because you would have people go join a monastery, and if you've made a big life decision, like I'm going to be celibate and live a voluntary life of poverty. I mean, there's people are either very hardcore, or there's something at their and that could be a very spiritual, intrinsically motivated thing, or it could be that someone is not able to function in society, and so they're thinking, maybe I can go function in a monastery. I can't. So they go to a monastery. People seek out religion sometimes because they have these mental difficulties, and so the religious professionals, the abbots of these monasteries, recognized that a lot of their young initiates had serious hang-ups about stuff. So even one of them was Martin Luther, who is famously started the Protestant, Reformation in the 1500s. He would go and he would confess multiple times a day, because he would go and confess, and then he'd feel clean or pure, and he'd go and have a nasty thought, and then he'd feel like he had to come back and confess. And his abbot, the superior at the monastery, said, "Look, dude, you can only come confess once a day. You're wearing me out." and really, like, for Martin, that was to have that support was important, because then he began to understand that God wasn't looking over his shoulder like a scorekeeper, that really it was all about grace. And his personal revolution started, his personal conversion started this global movement, which became the Protestant Reformation, because he was like, no, this isn't about law, it's about grace. It's about, God doesn't want you to live this kind of life. So one of his big insights in his journal is he says he was overwhelmed by the light. He would be standing in the light, and it would reveal all his flaws. And he wrote how horrified he was of the light, how terrified he was of the light. And then he finally realized the light wasn't God, it was the devil. And like, what a big revelation that was for him. It was like, this is not how God treats you. So, I think that's, again, I don't want people to go away thinking, oh, it's everything I feel bad must be from demons. But I think it was an understanding of, I got to turn this thing around and look at it differently. And suddenly he had this freedom. So I think that was a form of therapy his abbot did for him.
Oh, yes. Yes. If you limit behavior, we call it resisting compulsions, what you experience is a decrease in anxiety. Initially, an increase, because you're going against what it is that you think is supposed to give you relief. Maybe it's to confess your sins repeatedly, or to go to somebody to confess, or to do a certain amount of prayer until it feels right, or some other kind of thing. When you resist doing that and become successful with it, eventually the discomfort decreases, because you've stopped reinforcing the pattern of behavior. And so people then, and we, Paul and I and you, we've experienced this with people as they begin to resist these additional religious things, which kind of goes against the idea of grace. You got to do certain things in a certain way in order to be okay. They can experience joy in their religious faith rather than being triggered by it.
Yeah. It occurs to me that kind of what you're indicating there is that scrupulosity really, it causes suffering, And it really gets away from the main idea. I mean, if you look across religious, not just Christian, but Buddhist and Hindu and other kinds of, the great religions of the world really are partially about helping you get over yourself. That the idea is, like Jesus says, look at the birds, look at the lilies. They're not worried about tomorrow.
Why are you
Paul
worried about this?
Yeah, don't worry about, Paul talks about the peace that passes understanding. And, the Buddha says, that you're trying to quiet the monkey mind that's running here and there, scampering all around and finding things to be anxious and worried about. He talks about how we manufacture our own suffering. So you look across religions, it's the idea is to get over yourself, and scrupulosity gets you wrapped up in yourself. It gets you tangled up in your thoughts and second guessing yourself. And, you're wanting certainty. Here's the other thing is you're wanting certainty about something, and faith is all about uncertainty, like being okay with uncertainty. That's a hard
Trusting.
thing.
Yeah.
Trusting something beyond yourself.
Expand on uncertainty, Paul.
Okay, well, that's that's the big bugaboo with any anxiety. It sort of demands certainty, whether it's I'm going to be okay. If somebody has an anxious anxiety about their health or getting in an accident or something happening to someone or whatever it is, accepting uncertainty is always a big obstacle. And this desire for it is a never-ending path. So accepting uncertainty is a big part of really any kind of therapy for anxiety.